Welcome back to Modern Stoic Mind. Last week, we explored the storms that live inside the mind. Overthinking, anxiety, approval, distraction, and the search for peace. But this week, we explore a different burden. The weight we carry long after the moment has passed. Regret, guilt, resentment, missed opportunities, and the difficult art of letting go. Tonight's story is about a man carrying a mistake he could never forgive himself for. A mistake that followed him everywhere. A mistake he relived every single day. This is the man who could not forgive himself. Some prisons have no walls. They are built from memories. Every morning he woke carrying the same burden. A single mistake, years old, yet somehow, still alive inside him. He replayed it endlessly. The words he should not have said. The choice he should not have made. The moment he wished he could take back. Again, and again, and again. Time moved forward, but he remained trapped. The world had forgiven him. Others had moved on. Yet he refused to release himself. One autumn evening he wandered beside a river covered with drifting leaves. The air was cool. The water moved quietly through the fading light. There, sitting on a worn wooden bench, was an old philosopher, watching the river. The man sat beside him. Neither spoke. Only the sound of water moving over stone. Finally he whispered, "I cannot forgive myself." The philosopher nodded, as though he had heard these words many times before. Then he pointed toward the river. "Do you see those leaves?" "Yes." "Can they travel upstream?" "No." "Then why do you spend your life trying to move backwards through time?" The man stared at the water. The leaves continued drifting away, unaffected, unburdened, free. The philosopher spoke softly. "You believe punishment is the same thing as responsibility. But they are not the same. A lesson teaches. A punishment repeats." The words landed heavily. For years he had mistaken self-destruction for accountability. He believed that if he suffered enough, he could somehow change the past. But the river continued moving. Never backwards. Always forward. The philosopher smiled gently. "The past is a teacher. It was never meant to be your home." As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The man closed his eyes. For the first time, he stopped fighting the memory. He simply accepted it. Not because it was good. Not because it was painless. But because it had already happened. The river carried another leaf beyond the horizon. And with it, something inside him began to loosen. You cannot heal while demanding a different past. You cannot grow while living inside yesterday. Forgiveness does not erase the lesson. It allows you to carry it without carrying the pain. The man stood. The river continued flowing. The leaves continued drifting. And for the first time in years, he walked forward. Modern Stoic Mind. Welcome back to Modern Stoic Mind. This week, we are exploring the burdens we carry long after the moment has passed. The weight of regret, the weight of guilt, the weight of yesterday. Tonight's story is about a woman who spent years carrying a past she could never change. This is the woman who carried yesterday. Every morning she woke with the same companion. Not a person, not a memory, a regret. It followed her everywhere, through quiet mornings, through crowded afternoons, through sleepless nights. Always whispering, if only. If only she had made a different choice. If only she had spoken sooner. If only she had stayed. If only she had left. The possibilities never ended. Years passed, yet she remained trapped inside a moment that no longer existed. Living yesterday, ignoring today. One evening she walked along a deserted road beneath a golden sunset. The world around her was beautiful, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the past. As she walked, she came across an old woman sitting beside the road, watching the sun disappear beyond the hills. The old woman smiled. "You look tired." The younger woman nodded. "I carry too much." The old woman looked at the setting sun. "So does the evening." The younger woman looked confused. The old woman pointed west. "Tell me, can the sun return to this morning?" "No." "Can yesterday return?" "No." The old woman smiled gently. "Then why do you demand from yourself what nature itself cannot do?" The question landed heavily. For years she had been trying to rewrite history, trying to negotiate with time, trying to repair what no longer existed. The sunset deepened. Orange became gold. Gold became purple. The old woman spoke again. "The past asks only one thing from us. Learn. It never asks us to live there." As Seneca wrote, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary." The woman closed her eyes. For the first time, she stopped arguing with yesterday. She stopped asking impossible questions. She stopped demanding a different ending. The sun disappeared completely. The day was over. And somehow, that felt beautiful. Because she finally understood. Every sunset ends. Yet every sunrise returns. Life moves forward. And so must we. The road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time, she looked forward instead of back. Yesterday had taught her. It no longer owned her. Modern Stoic Mind. Welcome back to Modern Stoic Mind. This week, we are exploring the burdens we carry long after the moment has passed. Regret, guilt, and sometimes, resentment. Tonight's story is about a man who spent years carrying a burden he believed belonged to someone else. This is the stone in his pocket. It began with a single insult, a single betrayal, a single wound. Years passed, yet he carried it everywhere. Not in his hands, not on his shoulders. Inside his heart. Whenever he remembered what had happened, the anger returned. Fresh, sharp, alive. As though the wound had happened yesterday. The person who hurt him had moved on. The world had moved on. Yet he remained trapped. One autumn morning he set out on a journey through the mountains. The air was cold. The path was steep. In his pocket sat a smooth stone, a habit he had carried for years. As he climbed, the stone felt heavier. By midday his legs ached. His breathing grew labored. Eventually he reached a small river crossing. There sat an old philosopher watching the water flow over the rocks. The philosopher noticed the man's discomfort. "What are you carrying?" "Nothing." The philosopher smiled. "Then why do you look so burdened?" The man sat beside him. For a moment neither spoke. Only the sound of moving water. Finally he confessed, "I cannot forget what someone did to me." The philosopher pointed toward the stone in his pocket. "May I see it?" The man handed it over. The philosopher weighed it in his hand, then returned it. "How heavy is that stone?" "Not very." The philosopher nodded. "Carry it for an hour." The man shrugged. "Easy." "Carry it for a day." "Still manageable." "Carry it for 10 years." The man fell silent. The philosopher smiled gently. "The weight never changed. But the length of time you carried it did." The river continued flowing, unaffected, free. The philosopher spoke again. "Resentment is often like that. The injury may have been real, but the suffering continues because we refuse to put it down." The words struck deeply. For years he had believed his anger punished the other person. In reality, it had only punished him. As Epictetus taught, it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The man looked at the stone, then at the river. Slowly, he opened his hand. The stone dropped into the water. Gone. The river carried it away, just as time had carried away the years. And suddenly, he felt lighter. Forgiveness is not saying what happened was acceptable. It is refusing to carry the weight any longer. Some burdens belong in the past. Not in your pocket. Not in your heart. The man stood. The mountain path remained. But the weight was gone. And for the first time in years, the journey felt easier. Modern Stoic mind. Most people think failure ruins lives. It doesn't. More often, it is the fear of failure that does the damage. The business never started. The book never written. The opportunity never taken. The conversation never had. The dream never chased. Not because it was impossible. Because it felt safer to wait. This is the story of a man who spent years waiting to feel ready, and nearly lost his life to hesitation. This is the man who feared failure. As a child, he believed he could become anything. Most children do. They dream without limits, without statistics, without doubt, without fear. Then life teaches them something dangerous. What if you fail? The question followed him into adulthood. Every opportunity was met by another question. What if I fail? What if people laugh? What if I lose money? What if I'm not good enough? So he waited. And waiting felt responsible. Waiting felt intelligent. Waiting felt safe. Until one day he realized something. Years had passed. And his life had become a collection of plans, not experiences. He had notebooks full of ideas, dreams, goals, plans, but very few stories. One autumn morning he left the town and wandered into the mountains. The sky was dark. Storm clouds gathered above the peaks. The path climbed sharply upward. Yet what caught his attention was not the mountain. It was an old man climbing it. Slowly, patiently, one step at a time. The old man was not fast. He was not strong. He was not young. Yet he continued climbing. Curious, the younger man followed him. Eventually they stopped beside a cliff overlooking the valley below. The view was extraordinary. The old man smiled. The younger man looked terrified. "What if I fail?" he asked. The old man nodded, as though he had been expecting the question. Then he asked, "What if you do?" The younger man frowned. The answer felt wrong. Incomplete. Unhelpful. The old man continued, "What if you fail?" "What then?" "You learn. You adapt. You try again." The wind moved through the mountains. The old man pointed toward the valley below. "Do you see that town?" "Yes." "Every person down there has failed. Many of them repeatedly. Failure is not the exception. It is the tuition fee of growth." The younger man stood silently. For years he had treated failure as proof he was not good enough. The old man treated it as part of learning. The difference changed everything. The guide continued. "People think confidence comes before action. It doesn't. Confidence comes from surviving what you were once afraid of." Above them an eagle emerged from the storm, not avoiding the wind, using it. The old man pointed toward the sky. The eagle rises because of resistance, not despite it. For the first time, the younger man understood. He had spent years trying to eliminate risk, trying to guarantee success, trying to avoid failure completely. And in doing so, he had avoided life itself. As Cleanthes taught, fate leads the willing and drags along the reluctant. The mountain remained steep. The storm remained overhead. The risks remained real. Nothing had changed. Except him. He took a step. Then another. Then another. Not because he was suddenly confident. Not because he was certain. Not because he knew he would succeed. But because he finally understood something most people learn too late. The goal was never to avoid failure. The goal was to become the kind of person who could survive it. Many dreams die because people wait to feel ready. But readiness is rarely found. It is built. One step. One mistake. One lesson at a time. The storm continued. The mountain continued. The climb continued. And for the first time in years, so did he. Modern Stoic mind. For years he searched for answers. An explanation. A reason. Something that would finally make peace possible. But every answer led to another question. And every question led him back to the same place. Resistance. One autumn morning he found himself walking beside a river hidden beneath thick mist. The world was quiet. The kind of quiet that forces you to hear your own thoughts. Ahead stood an ancient stone bridge, its arch disappearing into the fog. At its entrance sat an old ferryman beside a lantern, watching the river. Not studying it, not controlling it, simply watching. The younger man sat beside him. Neither spoke, only the sound of flowing water. Finally he asked, "How do I find peace?" The ferryman smiled, then pointed toward the river. What happens when the river meets a stone? It flows around it. And when the seasons change, it changes too. And when storms arrive, it keeps moving. The ferryman nodded. The river survives because it accepts what it cannot control. The younger man stared into the water. For years he had done the opposite. Fighting, resisting, demanding, arguing, as though reality needed his approval. The ferryman picked up a small stone, dropped it into the river. Ripples spread across the surface, then faded. Pain is often like that. The first ripple is unavoidable. But many people spend years creating the second. The younger man lowered his head, because he knew exactly what the ferryman meant. His suffering had not come only from what happened. It came from his refusal to accept that it happened. The ferryman looked toward the bridge, then said something the younger man would never forget. "You are trying to cross the river, while carrying the river." The younger man frowned. The ferryman continued. "You carry old conversations, old disappointments, old losses, old versions of yourself. And then you wonder why the journey feels so heavy." The mist drifted slowly across the water. The lantern flickered softly. Then the ferryman lifted it. "This light does not remove the fog. It only helps me take the next step." Acceptance works the same way. The younger man watched the lantern glow, a small light surrounded by uncertainty. Yet somehow, it was enough. The ferryman spoke again. Reality does not ask for your permission. It simply arrives. The words landed harder than anything he had heard all morning. Because they were true. Life had happened. Whether he liked it or not. Whether he understood it or not. Whether he accepted it or not. As Laozi taught, life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them. The younger man closed his eyes. For the first time, he stopped arguing, stopped negotiating, stopped demanding different answers from an unchangeable past. And in that moment something unexpected happened. The weight became lighter. The strange thing about acceptance is that most people think it comes at the end of healing. Often, it is the beginning. The ferryman stood, picked up his lantern, and stepped onto the bridge. The younger man followed. The bridge disappeared into the mist. He could not see the other side. But for the first time, he did not need to. The bridge had been there all along. The river had been there all along. The path forward had been there all along. The only thing standing in the way was his refusal to stop fighting the water. The sun broke through the fog. Golden light touched the river. The mist began to fade. The ferryman disappeared into the distance. The river continued flowing. And so did he. Modern Stoic mind. At 35, she thought life would look different. At 45, she still believed she could catch up. By 55, she realized she was no longer grieving the past. She was grieving a future that never arrived. The life she thought she would have. The life she planned for. The life she expected. The relationship. The career. The version of herself she was certain she would become. And every day she compared reality to a future that no longer existed. Every day reality lost. This is the woman who learned to let go. For years she carried a quiet sadness. Not the kind people could see. The kind hidden behind smiles. Behind routines. Behind busy days. It appeared in quiet moments. When she was alone. When she reflected. When she saw someone living a life she once imagined for herself. And every time, the same thought returned. This wasn't supposed to be my life. She had worked hard, made sacrifices, done what she believed she was supposed to do. Yet somehow life had unfolded differently. Some dreams had ended. Others had changed. Some never arrived at all. And although years had passed, part of her remained trapped inside a future that never happened. One evening she walked along a rugged coastline beneath darkening skies. Waves crashed against the cliffs below. The wind carried the scent of salt and rain. In the distance stood an old lighthouse, its beam sweeping slowly across the ocean. Steady, calm, unafraid of the storm. Drawn toward it, she followed the cliff path until she reached its base. There she found an elderly lighthouse keeper watching the sea. He seemed completely at peace, the kind of peace she had spent years searching for. Finally she asked, "How do I let go?" The keeper looked at her, then asked, "Of what?" "The future I lost." The old man smiled gently, then shook his head. "You cannot lose a future. Only an expectation." The woman stared out across the ocean. Because suddenly she could see it. She had not been fighting reality. She had been fighting the gap between reality and expectation. The keeper watched the waves for a moment, then spoke again. You keep treating life like it broke a promise. But life never promised anything. The words stung. Not because they were cruel. Because they were true. For years she had believed life owed her a particular outcome, a particular story, a particular future. And every year reality failed to match that picture. She felt betrayed. The lighthouse keeper pointed toward the tower behind them. Do you know why the lighthouse was built? To guide ships. The old man smiled. Partly. The lighthouse was never built to stop storms. It was built because storms are inevitable. The wind grew stronger. The waves crashed harder. Yet the lighthouse remained. Steady. Reliable. Unmoved. The keeper continued. If sailors waited for perfect weather, no ship would ever leave the harbor. The woman watched the beam sweep across the dark sea. For years she had been waiting. Waiting for life to become what she expected. Waiting for reality to match the picture in her mind. Waiting for a future that was never coming. The keeper spoke softly. The life you wanted is not always the life you need. Something shifted inside her. Not because the pain disappeared, but because she finally stopped demanding a different story. The strange thing about letting go is that people think it means losing something. Often it means gaining something. Freedom. As Marcus Aurelius taught, accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny. The waves continued rolling toward the shore. The wind continued moving across the cliffs. The storm continued its journey across the sea. And for the first time in years, she stopped resisting. Some people spend so much time mourning the life they expected, that they never notice the beauty of the life that arrived instead. The keeper pointed toward the horizon. A distant ship emerged through the storm. Its course was different than planned. Its journey harder than expected. Yet it continued forward. Look. The ship never reached the harbor it planned for. Yet somehow, it still found land. The storm slowly began to clear. The lighthouse beam swept across calmer waters. Golden light appeared along the horizon. And standing beside that lighthouse, she realized something. The future she lost had never existed. But the life in front of her did. For the first time, she stopped looking over her shoulder at a road she never traveled, and started walking the one beneath her feet. The ocean remained vast. The future remained uncertain. The journey remained unfinished. But the burden was gone. And as she walked away from the lighthouse, she understood at last. Peace was never waiting in the life she imagined. It was waiting in the life she already had. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt free. Modern Stoic mind. And so ends another week on Modern Stoic Mind. This week we explored the burdens that so many people quietly carry. Guilt, regret, resentment, fear, resistance, and finally, the freedom that comes from letting go. Perhaps the lessons were different, but the message was the same. The past cannot be changed. The future cannot be controlled. But the present is still ours. Maybe there is something you need to forgive. Maybe there is something you need to release. Maybe there is a burden you've been carrying for far too long. Whatever it is, I hope these stories reminded you that peace is not found by controlling life. It is found by learning how to walk through it. If one of these stories stayed with you, if one of them spoke to you, or helped you see life a little differently, then consider following or subscribing so you don't miss next week's journey. And before you go, I'd love to know, which story from this week resonated with you the most? Until next time, guard your peace.